I've been with Proplanner for several years now. I manage the sales, and one of our major accounts is CNH. CNH has been our account for several years now, and we've grown from a couple of plants to over 21 plants now within CNH. So what I wanted to do this morning was have Kelly, she's the Director of Manufacturing Systems from the ICT group, present the kind of the thought process of why CNH went with Proplanner, how they've grown, and what the future is with the solutions. So Kelly, I will move on to the next slide.
Excellent.
If I can. All right, Kelly, go ahead.
So those of you that may not be familiar, I'm going to go through a little bit about the company CNH Industrial. CNH Industrial is a heavy equipment manufacturer focused on agricultural and CE products. Many people do not know our parent company name, CNH Industrial, but you probably know us by one of our brands. We work in the agricultural section under Case IH, also known as International Harvester for those of you who go back in the days. New Holland Agricultural, which also has roots in Ford Truck or Ford Tractor, and the Steyr brand in Europe. We also have our construction equipment brand, Case and New Holland Construction Equipment, focusing mostly on the light to medium weight construction equipment products. So under those 5 brands, we've just reconsolidated under a single company, splitting up a little bit from our truck and bus business that we also used to have under our umbrella. Right now we're about just shy of a $20 billion company with about 37,000 employees. And one of the challenges for us as IT and in our manufacturing is that we have 38 distinct plants. As you can tell by our brands, we're a bit of a company with some history of merger and acquisitions. And we've kind of organically grown, which has left us with a lot of unique plants worldwide. As for me, my roles and responsibilities, Bondo, if you want to go to the next one, I'm in charge of the IT for the manufacturing systems at the US and Canadian plants. In the United States for Case IH, we have 8 plants with 1 in Canada and a joint venture in Mexico. And those facilities for any IT systems, those systems and applications fall under my team's responsibility. I've been with CNH for 14 years now, about half of which I've actually spent in supporting our commercial brands and our commercial business with sales order through pay and our ordered cash sort of functionalities. And the last 7 years or so, I've been working with our plants and focused on the manufacturing area. So as Bondo said, we date back with Proplanner a long ways now, over 15 years that CNH has been engaged with Proplanner. I would say that in a large way, the Proplanner growth in Proplanner at CNH has been a bit bottom up organic growth. It started with a few of the plants, and then in some ways as the plants vetted the product, we've also worked centrally through my group and through our strategic IT to support deployments at the plants. And it is in some way, shape, or form at 8 of our 10 US and Canadian based plants. Only the JV in Mexico and our newest acquired plant in NAFTA have been excluded, but there's discussion to expand to that plant as well at some point in time. So it is heavily used in the North American region, but we also have plants in Europe and in the Latin American region that have used, do use Proplanner. We use, I'd say, most of the modules. We may use some of the modules in Proplanner more or less, depending on what plant you look at. But if you look at us broadly, I think it's fair to say we've dabbled in most of the available Proplanner functionality in CNH. So to the left kind of gives a high-level map of how the plants, particularly the US plants, are integrated in CNH with our other systems. And Proplanner is highly integrated to the other systems in our landscapes, and has been for quite a long time. And for us, it starts with the integration to our engineering systems, noted there by EC. We call it Engineering Central, but we get the engineering bill of material interfaced directly into Assembly Planner from our engineering systems. And subsequently, once an engineering BOM is established through the first release of the product, we get the corresponding engineering change orders as our products evolve. If I didn't state it before, I'll go back for a second. Obviously, as a major equipment provider in tractors and tractor loader backhoes, skid steers, and the other types of heavy equipment that we do, we're highly configured to order. So our BOM configurations have, in many cases, thousands of valid variations in the configurations that we offer our customers, and the complexity of our engineering BOMs coming into Assembly Planner is very high, but of course that's one of the advantages of using Proplanner. So the engineering information comes into our Assembly Planner, and we develop the full manufacturing BOM as a result of the engineering BOM. We can make changes for the manufacturing process, add things like spacers or other items, delete anything that's not relevant to the way we're going to manufacture. And also, of course, because of our process is fully in Assembly Planner, we can take the engineering and break it down into our assembly stations and our exact routing processes, and consume the exact parts to the exact point in the line that we're going to need the part and build the process. Once the MBOM is established and ready to be released, we interface that back into our MRP. So our materials, our BOMs, our routings that our MRPs use, and we have several MRPs globally, about one per every plant that uses Proplanner, but all of them use the Proplanner data as the master. So we're tightly integrated in that circle. And then our sales and operations groups, the orders come into our MRP, and we get our demand requirements. We also, which is probably slightly unique to CNH, we don't just use our the line balance functionality in Proplanner, but we also use a scheduler module based on Proplanner to do our distinct tact level line schedules. And that also feeds into kitting, and which using the bill of process and the PFEP data module available in Proplanner, we enable our warehouse management and logistics functions to deliver just in time for us for our kitted parts. And we have two flavors of that right now. One is to use the straight up Proplanner PFEP kitting module, with the scanners, moving to Android scanners and have that operational in several of our plants. And in the plants that have a more sophisticated WMS tracking the inventory, the kit information is actually interfaced off to the WMS, so the WMS can manage the full cycle of what we've consumed on the kit and manage the automatic replenishment of those kitting areas. We use time studies, the detailed work instructions, and we are dabbling, just like Oshkosh before us, the presenter before us, in shop floor viewer, and have an active pilot going at least in one of our plants. And that's one of the exciting things for the future that we're looking to deploy more widely. Bondo, anything to add? Anything you think I missed based on your years of experience with us?
I think the biggest factor here is the ECOs and deviations are sent to Proplanner so far ahead in the process that any BOM changes that are made are announced to the manufacturing group that early, right? So it's not later after the change is already implemented in the MBOM. So they are involved in the process from the very beginning, and that helps with the process planning, the thinking about the line rebalance and the tool allocation and resource allocation. So that's something unique here that I think gives them that advantage of seeing the ECOs that early in the process. And the change workflows kind of help with that. So we have created, for some plants, quite complicated workflows where every group, right from purchasing to planning to, fab and manufacturing down to logistics, they're all involved in the change workflows per ECO so that they're notified, they're aware. And it's work in progress. We're adding more and more kind of reporting capabilities in there, but that gives them that view of what's coming down the line with the change.
Yeah, absolutely. And then going to the next slide, and this is a good illustration. Of course, we've got our manufacturing engineer teams that use several pieces of the flow. But because we're integrated tightly to the logistics side with the PFEP, those workflows really help us when an ECO is released to coordinate the activities within both Assembly Planner and the PFEP module across the various stakeholders at the plants that need to touch a new material or an MCO across its life cycle to make sure that all the boxes are ticked, that the data is effectively managed across all the processes that are going to be downstream from that manufacturing change order. And we use the workflows to balance the activities of these different groups in their activities and to make sure that everything should hang together, because so much of our process relies on the bill of process and the information coming out of the Assembly Planner module.
Right. I think that's good for this slide, Kelly. I think you covered most of the key points. On the shop floor, we have right now an integration with something called Pivotware. It's a middleware that communicates between the torque tool and the shop floor viewer, which has the work instruction data for that tool. We'll demonstrate later how we can possibly avoid Pivotware and talk directly to the tool. That's one of the setups that we have that we'll cover on later. But it's just a middleware that helps us communicate the shop floor instruction data directly to the tool.
All right. When we're starting to get into torque control and Bondo's right, and we're looking to maybe expand into the direct Proplanner torque functionalities coming available. But at minimum, again, because the bill of process defined all of that information, it was very important to us that any integration with torque, that we use the Proplanner bill of process as our master, because we didn't want to have different views of the truth or different steps, operational steps or instructions anywhere other than Proplanner. So.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. As I mentioned, we've been with Proplanner a long time, but that doesn't mean that we don't have more good work to do if we look at our landscapes, particularly, as I said, because some of our projects have been ground up, plant-driven requirements, such that, and we have such a diversity between NAFTA and Europe and some of the plants that use Proplanner. We've definitely got opportunities where not every single one of our facilities are using every module in Proplanner, and in some cases, every module exactly the same. So we're definitely pushing to do a more consolidated view so that the plants have more unified processes, and also working to get to a point where we can advertise, push, and get some more adoption in some of the newer modules. The 3D viewer is a good example. We've got some plants that are getting some tremendous benefits out of the new 3D viewer, being able to take the JTs right out of our engineering systems and loading them into Proplanner, and then using that to construct the standard work instructions in Proplanner, which then eventually would feed into the shop floor viewer, depending on the use of the shop floor viewer in the plant. So we've got a few plants that have gotten very deep into the use of the new viewer. We have some other plants where we need to get that adoption going at the same level. And as I said, we've got some plants that have actually started to use the shop floor viewer, and some plants that are just having early discussions about the potential for it. And again, I heard some of the echoes with the previous speaker about there is some change management involved with the shop floor viewer. I feel very strongly that the software side of shop floor viewer is probably the lesser of the challenges, versus making sure that we've got strong champions at our plants that are going to put it out on the shop floor, encourage the users to use it and get over any of those perceptions that might be out there about Big Brother and you know, being able to access the things and, oh, I know how to build this unit because I've been building it my whole life. So there's definitely some trade-offs and some challenges as we get into the shop floor viewer, particularly, which kind of dovetails into the point too, is the MES features available to us with the shop floor viewer. I think will be incredibly important for us. We don't necessarily have a legacy MES, big, ugly assembly MES at our plants that we've had for years. And honestly, now with Proplanner, I think it gives us a lot of opportunity. And the advantage I see with Proplanner is that I don't have to interface to anything, and I don't have to reinvent the wheel on the build process, the work instructions, whatever. It's all already there because we've already put the manufacturing engineering work into the assembly planner. It's just a matter of presenting it to the shop floor now. And in that vein, we've worked or talked with Bondo quite a bit about quality opportunities. There's already some things that I see Proplanners baking into the shop floor viewer on making sure that we can start to put in our inline process defects directly into the shop floor viewer. And then there are some things that for quality network and long-term defect tracking and repair that we're in high-level discussions about where the future can be. We have a quality system today, but in the future, we're looking at what other options we have, and Proplanners definitely in the discussion of how the shop floor viewer can start to meet our long-term quality needs. So, and the last thing I didn't mention on the previous slide, but you don't have to go back, is that because we've been with Proplanner so long, we're on-prem still, but we're definitely having very detailed discussions now about what our options are to move to cloud, and are excited about the possibilities that the cloud view is going to give to us in the long term versus our current on-prem. And really, as I said, we've just been so long, we're kind of baked into on-prem, but we don't see it as our future. So again,
Kelly, we just there's a time check, so maybe we want to go through maybe a couple more, and then we'll have to.
No, I was thinking I was about done. So
okay, yeah. I mean, maybe we leave it up to questions now. If there are questions from any.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, thanks, Kelly.
Questions from the room here? Go ahead.
So scheduler module that you guys mentioned about something new to us.
Mhm.
Do you like to elaborate any more on that? How are you guys?
Right. So the scheduler module. So the question on scheduler module, and I can answer that. So it's a module that allows you to bring in unscheduled orders. So basically a bucket of orders that are possibly in the allocation window still not confirmed yet. And what the schedulers do in our scheduler model is apply some constraints on it. So it could be commercial constraints, it could be plant-based constraints, and then sequence the orders by day, depending on the availability of slots in a given day. So if you're working half a day or if you have a holiday or whatever. So looking at the current work schedule, looking at constraints, commercial and plant, that helps the scheduler move the orders to the right slots. We did attempt to automate the whole thing, which we met some resistance, but manually at least. And as you're doing it, it lets you know whether all your constraints are being met on a day-to-day basis.
So good constraints, just to highlight for everybody, would be something like, I don't want to do 2 4-wheel drive units in a row. If I'm going to paint the color yellow, I don't want to paint red right after yellow. I want to do 7 yellows before I do a red, right? If you've ever used I2, which is a old time scheduling tool, old time 90s, I guess.
I have.
Yeah, I gotta be careful when I say old, but it's very similar to that, where you could add your own constraints, and that was, you said, manufacturing constraints. Commercial constraints would be, I want to keep all of the units together that are on a customer order.
Yeah. Right.
I want to do them in sequence. So you can define hard constraints and soft constraints, and then, of course, as Bono said, you can then violate them all. What the software does is it puts little color codes next to whether you violated hard or soft constraints. It's not going to automatically violate a hard constraint, but it lets you violate hard constraints. Because at the end of the day, nobody, we do the best we can, and then all hell breaks loose, and we just schedule it this way anyway, right?
So it's a planning tool. It helps you create that initial schedule, push it up to MRP, and then it comes down to the actual production. And of course, things will change. You're out of parts, out of people. But yeah, so it helps create that initial schedule based on planning constraints that we can push off there. That's
and we actually have 2 scheduling technologies. One's called Scheduler, one's called Sequence Planner. Sequence Planner is only for vehicle sequence for the day.
Yeah.
So it lets you play with that because it's tied into the work instructions and it's tied into the logistics.
Yep.
Just in time getting you.
Right. So that if I move a unit ahead, I need to move that kit ahead. And so it does. It tells PFAP, oh, do this kit now. Okay. And even if that kit is done by a third-party provider, a logistics provider in another city, they're going to get that alert that this kit is now ahead.
Yeah.
Or if I have to pull a unit off the line, right? Sequencer is where I pull it off the line to communicate to the work instructions and to the logistics that has to be done. And one other interesting thing about it, sometimes companies come to us, I know we have a lot of people from Europe that struggle with this as well, is, well, what's the role of SAP? What's the role of ERP? They're supposed to tell us all this stuff. The problem is, as we all know in manufacturing, that things happen and I need to react and I need to change that BOM and I need to change that work instruction and I need to change the part kit in the next 12 minutes. So letting Proplanner do the part kitting and the work instructions, what it does, and then tell ERP what it did, it allows you to do that, right? It allows you to change that sequence. It allows you to change the part kit and execute it now. We'll tell SAP that we did it and it can update it later. But if you're trying to say, well, I want, the ERP system to do all that transactional logistics, the problem is those systems were never designed to respond in minutes and seconds. And that's where I think the MES system, AKA, Proplanner, PFAP, Proplanner work instructions, allows us to have that kind of responsiveness. And the other key thing, Kelly brought up a good point. When we got into the PFAP world, actually PFAP was kind of a manifestation of CNH's problem that got us in there, is that one source of truth which means that if the data model, we talk about the digital model here of the product, I know what parts go in that unit, and that's the same data that drives the work instruction parts list to the operator, put this part on, that drove the part kit, put this part in this box. So if the ECO comes and changes it, I change it in one place and it's broadcast. I will never, ever have a situation where I tell an operator to put a part on that isn't in the part kit that they got, because Proplanner is doing both of them and it's doing them instantly and immediately. And I think that's really important because some organizations struggle with that challenge of who owns what. Do I own the part list? Do I own the work instructions? The problem is if you don't own both, you run into problems. I want to take also an opportunity for the people online. So are there any online questions for Kelly before we need to move on to our next speaker? Go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like. Okay, thank you very much, Kelly. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kelly.
And,
Guys,
thanks. And then we will jump on to our next speaker.